Hello and welcome to this special E3 2017 edition of the Indie by Design podcast. This episode is hosted by both Stace Harmon and John Robertson and will feature us chatting about a slice of the indie game showing at this year's E3 event, as well as pulling out some of the games that have caught our eyes over the course of the show. So to that end, John, what have you made of the last few days?
I think it's interesting. There haven't really been too many surprises, to be honest. And some of the better games, or some of the more visible games at least, have been the ones from either bigger indie studios or sequels to games that we already know about, which is, I suppose that's par for the course for E3. It's not really the kind of place where kind of the small, tiny, unknown developers kind of make their mark, and even if those sort of people are there, then they're often sort of drowned out by the sort of crash bangs and that are made by the big platform holders, the big publishers, the big indie game studios, the big publishers that are working with indie game studios. So yeah, but still, there's been interesting games, and it's nice to see that a lot of indie games made it into most, if not all, of the big, the sort of major press conferences, and certainly the Sony and Microsoft one had a bunch of indie games, and EA had A Way Out, which was the first show of E3. So yeah, it's nice to see indie games on that big stage.
I think, it's like you say, often the ones that you see are the ones that the publishers are making a big deal of, and they're the ones that appear in the show reels. At least for this week, whilst E3 is going on, I think that you often get like the smaller things come out in sort of the aftermath of E3, don't they? Like where people have actually had a chance to sit down and take a breath and start writing about some of the stuff they saw on the show floor. And I know when both of us have been to E3 in the past, and it's that week of E3, you were just kind of scrambling to kind of keep your head above water and just get stuff out there. It's 20. Well, yeah, from both the game, the developer and publisher side, and from the journalist side, it's a scramble to get your stuff seen. As a journalist, you're seeing 15, 20 games in a day for 15, 20 minutes each, and at the end of the day, you've got to try to write about something, and it's hard enough to remember what you've even seen, rather than to actually put some coherent thoughts down on paper. And you're not going to write 15 games, are you? You're not going to write about 15 games in one day. So you're only really going to do the stuff that sticks out, or the stuff that your editor tells you is vital. So indie games have they're at a bit of a disadvantage there, because if you've seen Destiny 2 and Uncharted DLC in one day, and then on that same day you've also seen Ruiner and Griftlands, it's you might not have time to write about those. So. Yeah, I think it does. It does amuse me, kind of the big slick presentations that you get, or even the big slick kind of image that you have of E3. Which, on one level, it definitely is. The public facing stuff is that, but it is amusing to kind of remember back behind the scenes of when you are going to those appointments and you're traipsing from one hall to the next, and then like you say, at the end of the day, you're kind of then sat there, you've wolfed down some highly nutritious fast food, and then you just kind of
5-hour energy drink.
Yeah, and it's like it's quite a dichotomy of these two things. It's like one of the biggest shows, well, the biggest video game show, I guess, on Earth, and then the behind the scenes, it's just one of those duck things on paddling furiously underneath while you glide serenely on top. But that's
I suppose. Yeah, in terms of what was shown at the press conferences, it was nice to see the sort of indie games there on show reels and stuff, but there wasn't, certainly compared to the past, there wasn't so much kind of in-person or sort of in-depth stuff. Like, you know, in the past, ID at Xbox and Chris Charlo's come out on stage. He's been talking for a while. And in the past, we've had Devolver talk about a whole bunch of stuff and have their developers on stage. And obviously, not Gone Home. Hello Games with No Man's Sky was a big one. I mean, maybe Sony got burnt on that, and now they don't want any indie games. People talking about indie games live on stage.
Back in your box. Yeah, we gave you a chance. Get back in your box.
Yeah. So yeah, I suppose. Oh wow, A Way Out. I mean, what's his name? Joseph Fares. He came out on stage onto the in the EA show, which is kind of, you know, goes against what I've just said. So, you know, that sort of stuff was there to some degree this year as well.
It's an interesting one, that, isn't it? I think that there's been a lot of focus on how A Way Out contrasts with the previous title, Brothers, and I guess it's it's an obvious thing to look at the two games and say, well, they look very different, and one, you know, is very much looks like an indie game, another one looks like it could be as a result of a big AAA studio. And I wonder, like, do you get the impression, is that anything to do with the fact that it is backed so heavily by EA? Like, there's EA money in that, or have they just been more ambitious and thought, well, why can't we make a fully 3D third person escape 'em up or whatever it's going to be?
So the idea of the game is it's a 2-player split screen couch co-op game in which each player plays their own character. These two characters that are trying to break out of jail. I don't know. It's probably a mix of both. I'm guessing that Fares came up with this idea and then couldn't fund it himself, so maybe went sort of scouting around for publisher money to make it happen, and then EA liked the idea. I mean, yeah, like as you say, it does look very polished. Certainly the scenes. So some of what they showed was inside the prison and these two guys trying to escape, and I don't know what the guy's relationship is. I mean, it'll be you know, humorous, I suppose, if they were brothers. Just
I don't know. I think from what I could gather, they both know the same. They have a mutual acquaintance, I think, and one of the guys who has just come into prison, this third party has wronged him in some way, killed somebody that he loves or whatever it might be, and the other guy that's already in prison, Vince, I think his name is, he also knows this guy, and there's kind of, I think they both have been wronged by the same guy, so they're sort of, although they don't have much in common on the surface in terms of perhaps their lifestyles or their backgrounds, they have this kind of shared enemy, as it were, so they're kind of teaming up to do that. And it's worth noting, actually, that, yeah, like you say, it's 2-player, and it's 2-player only. Like, there is no single player option here, which is, I think it's brave. It means obviously not as many people will play it, probably. It may actually be that double the number of people play it, but probably not. Not as many people will play it, but it's nice to have that real strong focus where, you know, we've had a lot of time of an awful lot of games for many years that are very heavily single player, AAA games, Uncharted, The Last of Us, those kinds of things, that then have a multiplayer element stuck onto them. And it's nice to have that kind of built from the ground up thing as being a co-op. There is no, you're just this sort of anonymous player too. You are actually a proper player that inhabits, a proper character that inhabits the world. And it's going to be, it's couch co-op, as you mentioned, but it's going to be online as well. So I think you will theoretically be able to play with a stranger as well as a friend, and that'd be interesting. I don't know if there'll be like some sort of notion of personal goals for your own character that might sort of run counter to you working together. It'd be interesting to see how they balance that. Yeah,
well, one of I mean, based on what they showed and that idea of co-op, and the story kind of plays out in parallel, and also there are sequences where it looks like you're actually very much together doing exactly the same thing. Like, they showed a scene where
they were being chased by someone and they were in a car and they were getting away, and it was, you know, that was very, very Uncharted, but sort of co-op Uncharted style.
Yeah.
But I'm curious to how the narrative pacing is going to work, because if there's two people doing things and say one person has to achieve something and another person has to achieve something in order for the plot point to progress, then how does that work on a sort of pacing level? If one person can figure out their bit but the other person can't, does it hold up for everyone, or is it like broken down into very, 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 very tiny chunks so that those sort of long gaps between individual goals can't ever really occur? Like, you know, both characters have to do things within a few seconds of each other, and it's very obvious what you have to do all the time, so that those sort of pauses, because that would ruin any sort of sense of connection or whatever, because then you'd feel like you very much are just playing two independent games.
And you're just waiting for the other person to flick the switch or whatever it might be. I mean, there was a couple of things along those lines. There was a couple of things from the trailers, or the trailer, that stuck out. I think one of them was that, and it may have just been the way the trailer was shot, but I don't know, it felt like it's going to be a lot of sort of self-contained scenarios. I don't know how much coherence there is in terms of you walking around the prison and then you go into this area where you have to do something together and then you go off and do something else. It felt like you were kind of being thrust into these scenarios, and that, as I say, it may have just been the way that they showed the gameplay, that it's kind of, they were showing bits that were easy to highlight where the cooperative elements might come in. But yeah, it will be interesting to see how they handle that. Is it just one massive kind of not open world per se, but open game where these scenarios are set up as you progress through the story, or is it literally you're in this, like, divided into levels almost, that you're in this bit, now you're in this bit, now you're in this bit?
No, I imagine it'll be the divided thing. I can't think how else they would kind of intelligently bring that idea of this being like a cohesive thing together. Like it kind of looked like, you know, there were elements of like the modern Telltale games in there, but there was some more. There did seem to be some more exploration in that as well. Like you could go off the beaten path a little bit more, but you know, it's hard to tell. I mean, we've only seen a few minutes of it.
Yeah. There was a thing, like I did notice one bit where I think one of the characters is moving around being controlled and the other one is in a cutscene. So there's that kind of asynchronous storytelling going on where one person is experiencing something, the other one isn't. It reminded me a little bit, that particular element of it reminded me a little bit of how they handled the co-op in Dead Space 3, where I don't know if you played any of that, but you were two different characters and it was a bit clumsy, and I think I read something years afterwards that said it was never really intended to be set up the way that it was, and they just had to cobble it together, sort of not last minute, but kind of not ideally in the way they wanted to. But there were two characters in that, Isaac Clarke being one, and I don't remember what the other dude's name was, some big strapping soldier guy, and he had hallucinations at some point. So he would kind of, from the point of the player who was playing as Isaac Clarke, would sort of collapse to his knees and just be there, sort of dazed, and he'd retreat into his own mind. So the Isaac Clarke player would probably invariably have to protect him against the waves of enemies that then turned up, and the other player, who was this other dude, John Carver or something his name was, would then have to play his sort of fever dream, and so you were both playing at the same time, but you were both playing slightly different bits of gameplay. So I don't know, I mean, it wasn't the most elegant of solutions, but it did mean, it did get around that thing of, you know, like the person who was Isaac Clarke wasn't just stood there going, right, so, you know, are you nearly done, or what, like, what's going on? I'm just sort of stood there. So it's, hopefully it's a bit more of a sophisticated version of something along those lines.
Well, it looks more filmic, this one, in the sense of, you know, it's very normal in films to have, you know, the way films are edited, that the same scene is often shown from 2 or 3 different perspectives as it edits through characters' perspectives of that same event. I mean, that could be an interesting way of handling this if you're showing those two things on screen at the same time. I don't know, but yeah, I mean, it looks promising anyway. I mean, it's certainly an interesting on the conceptual level, and to see how that plays out.
Yeah, definitely. And then so I think moving from that, there's a game that was announced a while ago, but that has just received a release date called Matterfall from Housemarque. And Housemarque are a really interesting developer to me. They've done a lot of things that I've played of theirs, and they've done, I think, they did Alienation and Dead Nation and Resogun. And quite a while ago, they did a game called Outland, which was kind of it was a platformer, but the easiest way the sort of the central hook of it was the mechanic from Ikaruga, where you could switch colours to be able to absorb. I think you absorbed bullet. I don't know if you absorbed bullets or just when people hit you, if you were the right colour, then it didn't hurt you or something like that. So they've had some interesting ideas that you I feel like you see some of their progression. So definitely from Alienation and between Alienation and Dead Nation, there's a lot of similarities. And Alienation is just a much better version, really, of Dead Nation. Like it's I think better in every way. But this Matterfall seems to have not borrowed, but seems to have progressed some of the ideas that they've used previously. The whole voxel thing, it looks like the enemies from the announcement trailer, looks like the enemies are going to be made of voxels, which worked to good effect in Resogun.
Resogun's the only one of their games I've ever really played to any great degree. I've played a little bit of Dead Nation. I haven't played any Alienation yet. I do have a copy. I mean, stylistically, there's quite a lot of similarities between that and Resogun. Like, it's side-scrolling. The enemies seem to have like sort of formation patterns that you can, play and play again, and sort of try to, at least in some degree, master it. Because I think in Resogun there were patterns, but they weren't always. It was like partially, procedurally generated. They were like the same patterns coming up again and again, but they wouldn't always be in the same order, I think, if I remember it right. So it looks like maybe it could be similar to that, and
there's that. It looks like there may be some sort of platforming element. I think at one point in the sort of the announcement trailer, there's a bit where the cyber robot protagonist dude creates a platform.
It's a girl,
to stand
I think.
Is it?
The press release
cool.
says it's a girl. Yeah.
Okay, you would not you'd not tell that from the actual form of the protagonist. So that's good news. That's like they haven't made it overtly. Here's the
I think I've gotten that right. I'm just double checking that now.
So she creates like a platform to stand on, which I'm assuming will be some form of sort of platforming, maybe. But that also reminded me of Outland in that sense. And there's a bit right at the end of the trailer where they use red and blue throughout the trailer. Like the enemies are red, the gun that this protagonist is wielding is blue, and then right at the end in the logo of the Matterfall logo, the red and the blue kind of come together and form this bit of the logo, which really struck a chord with me with Outland, because that was red and blue. Like there was this big sort of I wouldn't go so far as to say it was symbolism, but that was one of the mechanics they used with the two different colours. So I'm wondering if there's going to be anything they're going to do with that. Although we're not going to have too long to find out, because it's coming out in August, so that will be.
Yeah, I think August 15th. I think it's listed as August 15th, so it's got a proper release date, not just Q1, Q2, whatever.
Yeah, which we should maybe see if we can get that and do some streaming of that. I think that would be interesting. And same goes for Housemarque's other game, which is actually coming out even sooner than August, which is Nex Machina, which is coming out next week, 20th of June. And again, you can see elements of Resogun in that. You can see elements of Alienation, Dead Nation, and that's been created in conjunction with in collaboration with Eugene Jarvis of Robotron and Smash TV fame and Defender. So that's they've got interesting Housemarque. They've got a lot of.
They've got a lot going on. They're just one of those ones, like, I haven't played their games a huge amount apart from Resogun, but everything that they do just, it just feels like it's just high quality. Like it's always like polished. It's always like really precise. Like,
yeah, definitely. So there's that. I don't know if Nex Machina is co-op. I've not actually looked into that. I don't know if you can play it co-op. I know it's like a score attack.
Pretty sure it is. Yeah, it is. I've just double checked. Yeah, it is.
Okay, cool. So maybe we should maybe check that out. And then along the it's not a co-op game, but it is definitely a two-player game. There's Nidhogg 2 has been caught my eye, and I can't watch a video of Nidhogg or Nidhogg 2 without laughing. It is just there's something inherently funny about it, and I think it's one of those games that when it's played well, played by two people that know what they're doing, it's incredibly impressive. And when it's played by two people that are just kind of a bit inept or don't really know what they're doing, it just looks really amusing. And Nidhogg 2 even more so than the original, because they've added kind of a lot more character to the two sword fighters.
Well, just the visuals in general are way more elaborate than like the backgrounds are way more elaborate, and there's way more like animation going on as well. Like the two main characters, I'm just looking at a picture of it now, or the one main character, the one main character model that's got different colours for different players. It's almost got like a kind of a pixelate, and this is maybe a bit of an odd sort of way to describe it, but it almost looks like a pixelated version of, remember Clay Fighter? Like it almost looks like that, like the characters kind of move in that kind of like wobbly sort of way.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, that's I was thinking they look a bit like they've come straight from the set of Sesame Street or something. Like they have that sort of puppet feel to them. Their joints are all sort of quite loose, and they just flop around the level. And
well, they kind of look like Homer Simpson as well. They've got the two big eyes and then the bald head, and they kind of like a bit round in the middle.
Yeah. Yeah, but that's. I mean, we spoke to Messoff, didn't we? I don't know when it was, a little while ago, a year and a half ago, a couple of years ago, about Nidhogg, and I think there was. They certainly didn't talk about Nidhogg 2 at that point, but there was certainly a sense that there could be more polish applied to Nidhogg. I think there was a few things they would have liked to have done a bit more of, and they talked about spending a lot of time getting the netcode sorted out for the two-player, and I think that kind of consumed a certain amount of development time. And so this is, I've not seen enough of Nidhogg 2 to be able to say how much of an evolution it is. I know there are different weapons in it, and the weapons apparently cycle through. So each time you die, you get a new weapon, new weapon of the 4 different weapons that there are.
I think there's like a bow and arrow, which could pretty significantly change the pace of the game as
definitely
in the first game.
Well, that was the thing with the first game, that often you could find yourself kind of chasing the other person, and you could do things like you could just stand still, and if you went out of the screen, you would then respawn in front of them if they had enough screen left for you to respawn in front of them. So there was sort of some deliberate. I mean, that wasn't like a glitch or a bug or anything. That was a deliberate part of the design. But it'd be interesting to see how that is affected, or how the weapons affect that, or how that is affected by the weapons one way or the other.
Well, I mean, that's the kind of thing with Nidhogg, isn't it? Like, you're not we can talk about all the visuals look nice and more elaborate and stuff, but not really going to know how good it is, or how much of an advancement or sort of diversification or whatever it is from the first game, until it's one of those games you have to like sit down and play for quite a while before you understand really those little nuances, and how even the most sort of discrete change actually alters stuff quite significantly over the long term, and certainly for like the players that are good, that can take advantage of those things.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think there's, but yeah, it does. It just makes me smile to look at it, and they are goofy characters, and they do the way they kind of stamp on each other, and there's the sound effects again are just hilarious, like these funny sort of half scream, half sort of comedy wailing that the characters do when they get stabbed or stamped on. It's just one of those games that it generally just makes me smile, and I think the overhaul of the visuals would just kind of enhance that effect. So
yeah,
and there's going to be more. Apparently, there's going to be quite a few more levels. I think it's going to start with 10 levels or something, whereas the original only had 4. So there will be a bit more variation, and so it might add some longevity to it. Maybe, I don't know. It'd be interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah, I'm just looking actually at the artist. The art is done by a guy called Toby Dixon, and his Tumblr has a bunch of pixel art, some of which is from Nidhogg 2, like backgrounds and stuff. And he does actually do claymation stuff here. There's stop motion stuff that he's done out of clay.
Oh, there you go. What do you know? He's brought the clay to life.
Yeah. It's quite good, actually. Yeah, that's quite a nice. It's interesting designs. It's very, I mean, the stuff here is very different to Nidhogg 1.
Yeah, well, that actually provides an amazingly slick segue into talking about the next game, which is from the company called Klei. That I only recently found that out. I thought it was pronounced either Klei or Klee. I didn't actually know.
I've been saying Klee.
Apparently, it's Klei rhymes with play is the general consensus. Or I say general consensus. I think that's actually what it says on their Twitter. But that's a fairly definitive. So they have a game coming out. So Klei is the developer that did things like Mark of the Ninja, and they did Shank, and they did what else did they do? Don't Starve, and Invisible Ink. Of those, actually, Don't Starve is the only one I haven't really played. But
that's the only one I have really played a lot.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go. That's why we work so well together. That's just we dovetail. That's really nice. But Invisible Ink, Shank, and Mark of the Ninja all share a similar graphical style with this new game, Griftlands. And it's not a huge amount. I've not really seen a huge amount of it yet, but that's a bit like Housemarque. They're another developer that I've always got time to have a proper look at what they're doing, because I find them quite an interesting developer.
Well, I've always got a lot of time for it, because when I say I've only really played Don't Starve significantly, I have played the other games as well, just not so much. And again, a bit like Housemarque, they're very precise. Their games seem to be always incredibly well thought through on a mechanical level. There's not much sort of fluff or slack in the interactions and the relationships between the player and the game. The game is always quite, it's focused isn't the right words in the sense of it being sort of narrow in the mechanics, but all the mechanics feed into each other to create this very focused sort of sense.
Yeah, they're very kind of consistent, aren't they? They're very each part does, like you say, it feeds into another part. It does what it needs to do. There isn't a lot of just disparate elements in their games. There's all this stuff that feeds into each other, be it mechanics or whatever it might be. And it's so it'd be interesting to see how Griftlands plays out.
Yeah, and this is, another thing I like about them as well is that they don't just sit on their laurels. They do very different kinds of games each time. Mark of the Ninja is very different to Don't Starve, and that's very different to Invisible Ink. And this Griftlands, is a big. Well, I don't know if it's big, but it's an RPG, and they're clear using the tagline "Everything is negotiable." So you infer from that while they state everything is negotiable, and from money to morals to loyalty. You can read into that there's going to be sort of choice and consequences, and possibly your actions will create a different.
Yeah, absolutely, a different kind of scenario for the game, and that's something they haven't done. Like you say, they do different things. They haven't done. Mark of the Ninja had a little bit of kind of Well, it had a story for sure, but it didn't really have any like dialogue choices, and Shank certainly didn't, and Invisible Ink was maybe a bit more like that, perhaps. But
yeah, and Don't Starve. You define your own story, but you define it in a much more abstracted way. It's not like dialogue choices. It's a procedurally generated world in which you have to survive. So the story of your survival character, as you work to not starve, and as the seasons change. I mean, there's a story there, but it's a story, in that kind of roguelike interaction kind of consequences way, rather than actual overt narrative sort of pathways that you're going to go down. So it'd be interesting to see how they handle this, because this game looks like it's got a lot of dialogue, and dialogue isn't. Yeah, Invisible Ink has some, but it doesn't have a huge amount. And this one looks like it's got. I mean, there are some screenshots being released, and there are multiple dialogue options, not just one or two. There's like 3 or 4.
And I think it'll be interesting to see how they. I'd like to see a kind of a cross between what they've done before and maybe some influences or some flavour from something like the Banner Saga kind of creep in there as well, where it's like it's not just. You can say the same thing in 3 different ways. It's like actually you can pick a choice that will drastically change your game and will affect who you have available going forward and that kind of thing. So, and I think it's maybe turn-based combat by the looks of it, which Invisible Ink was. Mark of the Ninja wasn't, obviously. So I'm definitely interested in that.
The art style looks quite nice as well. Certainly, like the character designs, it's got. It kind of looks a little bit like Don't Starve, but it's closer to something like the Banner Saga. But the Banner Saga crossed with, it reminds me of Cowboy Bebop, the anime show from the late 90s. It's got that kind of like retro futuristic look, almost like that,
right? Yeah,
almost like Final Fantasy VII. Like it's in the future, but they still haven't even gone to outer space. And or some of it's retro, some of it's futuristic. Like it looks like that kind of vibe.
Yeah. So that'd be interesting to see that one. And what else has there been?
There's a bunch of Devolver stuff. Some quite sort of. There's a lot of contrast between the Devolver stuff as well, like Ruiner and what's it called, Sword of Ditto, I believe, is like the two sort of made Swords of Ditto are the two kind of. The 2 sort of highest profile games, I suppose. They showed Ruiner, we've known about for a little while. Swords of Ditto was just announced just before E3, and it's Swords of Ditto is kind of like I suppose it's a roguelike, although I think they've been careful not to use that term. But it's a sort of isometric co-op, although you can play single player. Sort of melee, sort of beat 'em up, action combat game, I suppose, and you go through, and when you die, your offspring or someone that remembers you takes over, and then you play that character. So, and then the choices that you've made in the previous life follow over and like influence apparently how like the characters and stuff interact with you in the next one. So it's got a little bit of that like Rogue Legacy thing, but it looks more like a kind of a Zelda game with kind of like more overtly cartoony sort of graphics. So I mean that looks decent. And then Ruiner is visually and in terms of gameplay, actually, like completely the other ends of the spectrum from that. It's it's very deep, dark reds and blacks, and this sort of dystopian world of. Well, it's another top-down shooter, I suppose. Like, well, no, that is what it is. Like Nex Machina as well. So top-down shooters seem to be.
Yeah, Nex Machina, from the little I've seen of the two of them, Nex Machina looks like it's much more kind of score attack based. Although you are obviously attacking enemies, it looks like it's that kind of a bit like Resogun. It's that sort of keep the chain going. It's that sort of thing. Although I know Ruiner also seems to have like a chain based combat thing, a bit like Hotline Miami and many other games. But it looks more. It does, like you say, it looks darker. Ruiner looks sort of more like a cross between I don't know, like Running Man and The Purge or something. Something like that. It's
no, Nex Machina looks much faster than Ruiner. It's more like twitch combat-y focus, whereas Ruiner seems to be. I mean, I don't know. It might as the game progresses, it might get harder and harder and harder and faster and faster. But it seems to be more about kind of making, like the trailer that they showed just went through like what some of the different weapons can do, and you've got this like shield sort of dash thing, which is the same class. It seems to work in the same way as Enter the Gungeon, in that you do a roll and that's a dodge, but it also, if you go through bullets while rolling, you don't get hurt by them.
Yeah.
It's got that, so it seems to be more about kind of working out which tool you've got to use in a certain place, whereas Nex Machina just seems to be more, it's more like keeping that sort of flow, that sort of staying in the zone, going and going and going. But yeah, no, I like the look of Ruiner. Like, it promises that there's like a story and stuff. I don't know how that, like not just a story and stuff, but it promises that story is a big part of the overall sort of vibe. So it'll be interesting to see exactly how that's presented, if it's like environmental or if it's just cutscenes or text between missions, if the main character has like a lot to say or do in terms of interacting.
I think from the little I could glean from the website on that note, it looked. I think it's something to do with your the protagonist's brother has been taken or killed or something by these this bunch of miscreants that you are then sort of shown to be laying waste to. So I think there's like that sort of personal tie to it. But yeah, it does look interesting. The art is pretty cool. I like some of the like the still art, the concept art, but just also the actual art from the, like when somebody's talking, it has like a sort of painterly hand drawn feel, which contrasts quite well with the sort of slick cyber sci-fi sort of aesthetic. It's quite a nice mix.
Yeah, no, some of the concept art looks amazing. It's very like some of the robots and the like buildings and stuff it's very like anime. It's very like Ghost in the Shell, Akira, that sort of stuff. It's very it's like crisp like lines, but very sort of distorted, kind of oppressive kind of machines. Like it's got a good mix. And like that studio, it's made by Recon Reikon Games in Poland, and this is their first game. The studio was founded at the end of 2014, but it's I mean, some of the games that they've worked on between them is there's 4 of them. Yeah, there's four guys, but between them they've worked on Witcher 1, 2 and 3, Dead Island, Dying Light, Shadow Warrior, Anomaly, This War of Mine, Hard Reset, Cyberpunk 2077. So I mean, they've got form, definitely. Yeah, if they can continue that, then it's
well, hopefully there'll be. I'm looking for some sort of slightly dark humour in it as well. I'm hoping it's not just like, I'm a really cool kind of badass,
definitely
blade wielding killer, but that's kind of, Devolver does that well, and many of the games you just mentioned have kind of that slight edge to them as well. So hopefully that'll be seen here as well.
For sure. What else? Ori and the Blind Forest sequel.
See, I know. I mean, this is meant to be. This is an amazing game. I think for a while after Xbox One, soon after Xbox One came out, it was the original Ori and the Blind Forest was the highest rated Xbox exclusive game on the platform. And that was around the time that, kind of in the same way that Resogun was raved about. I don't know if it was one of the highest rated, but it was certainly raved about when PS4 came out. And it was kind of that time when there was a real focus, a real spotlight on these indie developers. But having said all that, I've not actually played Ori and the Blind Forest, so I don't know. I kind of don't know what. I mean, it looks lovely. I've not actually ever got around to playing it, so I don't.
Yeah, it's I played it all the way through. I played it all the way through once. I've have dipped in and out of it since then, but I haven't gone through it completely a second time. It's it's a Metroidvania game, I suppose, to use the jargon. So it's a huge sort of side-scrolling map with multiple layers and huge things to explore to the east of where you start, or huge things to explore to the west from where you start. And there's bosses littered around here, and it's sort of the pacing of the game is locked from things you have to find that then or do that then open up certain gateways that you couldn't go through originally, and you're encouraged to go back and forward to different things. And so it's not in I mean, there are some detailed game mechanics certainly in the combat that are quite interesting, but on a sort of overall level, it's not necessarily groundbreaking in its sort of. I mean, it's very much a genre kind of game. It's grounded in that Metroidvania genre, but it's just so it just does everything that it tries to do really nicely. Like pretty much everything works, and the visual style is really, really, really nice. It's got a sort of painterly feel, and it's not as sort of I don't know how to say it. Like, it's not sort of like comic book nerdy as most Metroidvania games are. You don't play this like stunningly powerful, amazing human or monster or whatever trying to just be a badass and like kill someone or get revenge or whatever. It's a more like, the two main characters have a kind of relationship that grows, and that's what really draws you through, or that's what drew me through the game anyway, more so than the exploration and stuff. Although the exploration is nice simply to see what the new environments look like, because the visuals are really nice. And yeah, the trailer in the new game, the sequel, is called Ori and the Will o' the Wisps, and I'm not sure, it doesn't come out till summer next year, which will be over 3 years since Ori and the Blind Forest came out. So they've had plenty of time to actually make a true sequel rather than just sort of rush out a sort of derivative kind of release.
Yeah, it's not like, that went really well, let's put another one of those out super quick. So yeah, hopefully it will be there'll be a bit more there. Yeah,
the trailer plays on the same kind of emotions as well, like, and it's a sort of sad and somber trailer. The music's quite kind of mellow and melodramatic as well, and there's soft lighting everywhere, and there's sort of whimsical frog creatures and purple owls, and there's giant spider underwater, which suggests there might be underwater environments. And I mean, it looks like more of the same game on a sort of tonal level, but given that they will have had over 3 years to work on it by the time it comes out, it should be some interesting kind of gameplay advancements and new additions as well. You'd hope there would be anyway.
Yeah. Well, like you say, it's got a while to go yet as well, so we'll see how that comes together. One of the games which I don't even know, honestly, if it's actually at E3 in terms of as a big presence, but I know that it's coming soon, and I'm actually quite looking forward to it, so I'm going to mention it anyway, is SteamWorld Dig 2, which currently I believe is a Nintendo Switch exclusive, which is almost kind of makes it notable in and of itself, just to have that kind of status. But the reason I've just thought of that is because it is a game I'm looking forward to a lot, but it is a game that looks very much like it does more of the same. So kind of like you were mentioning Ori there, that may or may not do that, but And I was just thinking then, well, that for me, with that particular game, I'd be quite happy to have more of the same of that. It's that, I guess it's that thing that, of course, not every sequel is going to be or should be particularly innovative. Sometimes it's enough to refine and improve on what's gone before. But that, the fact that that's going to be, because I played the original one of that, I think it was on PS4 and Vita, but I played it on Vita, I think almost exclusively, because it just to me felt very much like a handheld game. And so the sequel being on Switch kind of makes perfect sense to me. Sadly, probably isn't going to make it to Vita because not a lot is. But
there are some things. Undertale has just been announced for Vita.
Oh, has it?
That was over at E3. Yeah, so the occasional interesting games still come.
Yeah. Well, I think that may be by virtue of a lot of games now come to like PS4 and they are cross-buy and cross-play with Vita, which helps. I think it just kind of keeps the platform treading water. But yes, so SteamWorld Dig 2, looking forward to that. I think it will probably very much be more of the same. But there's a thing for me that like it feels like it will fit the Switch hardware really well. And there's something about that. There's certain games that have come out that I've thought, well, do you know what? That for me is a handheld game. Like I really want to wait. Like when I heard that Darkest Dungeon, that was out on PC for a while, and then I heard it was coming out on Vita. I thought, well, actually, I'm going to wait and get it on Vita because there's just something about it that for me really fits the hardware that I'm more likely to sit and play it, be it on the sofa or on the train or in bed or whatever, than I am to sit and play it at my PC, sort of sat up at a desk playing it. So there's I don't know kind of what in particular that is for me, but there's certain games that really work like that, and SteamWorld Dig 2 is definitely one of them.
Yeah, I don't know a huge amount about SteamWorlds, to be honest, so I'm not really sure. But certainly Darkest Dungeon, I would have played that on Vita a lot. But before it came out on Vita, I'd already played it. I had it in early access from a week or two after it got released on early access on PC, and I put in, I don't know, 150 or 200 hours into that game on PC, and I'm not playing anymore. I'm not, that's a stressful game. I'm not. Yeah. I think I've probably had my fill of that at least for the next year or so.
Yeah. Well, they are also releasing an expansion for it. I don't know if that's. I think it might only be coming to PC. I don't know. I could be completely wrong about that, but they're definitely releasing an expansion for it, which I think is called the Crimson Court, which is coming out. Which I believe you do definitely need the base game to play. It's not like a standalone thing. So I'll probably dip back in and sort of have a look and see when that comes out. But yeah, Salt and Sanctuary is another one, which for me was, I waited for a very long time to play that on Vita, which was sort of the 2D Dark Souls inspired game, which is really, really very, very good. But that for me was a sort of a must buy on on Vita as well, rather than PS4. So yeah. So have we got anything else?
I think that's all the big games, the bigger of the games. There's one other game that I've been quite impressed by, which is, supposedly it's only an hour long. It's on PC and iOS. It's called Donut County. It's by a guy called Ben Esposito, who's worked on a bunch of games in various sort of roles. He worked on Unfinished Swan and What Remains of Edith Finch. Who we've got a recent podcast. Yeah, got a recent podcast episode with
Ian Dallas,
creators of those guys. So you can go and listen to that. But anyway, so he works. He's sort of freelance, but he's worked on various games. Those are the biggest ones. But he's got a game that he's made himself called Donut County coming out, and it's kind of like a reverse kind of Katamari game, I suppose. Like, the Katamari games, you've got to roll a ball around and make it bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and you need to make it the same size as something else in order to pick up the bigger stuff. So this is a game where there's a community called Donut County, and there's this mysterious hole in the floor that keeps like sucking up people's possessions and houses and stuff, and you control the hole. And the hole starts really small, and then you can only put the small things in it, but then as you put stuff in the hole grows and grows and grows and grows and grows until you're taking up the whole
the whole town basically.
Oh, awesome.
And then it's got this like story bit where people who have been like sucked into the hole are like telling these sort of fables, these like folk tales about how they think this thing's happened, and each person has got like a different view of what the hole is. Is it a god? Is it like a sign from this? Is it this sort of tectonic event? And yeah, I mean, it just looks really it's not like a huge game. I say it's only about an hour long supposedly, but it's just like a neat sort of mechanical idea. I mean, there's only one idea, but like the fact that it's got like the little sort of narrative wrapped around it makes it seem quite interesting, and it's also ripe for innuendo. It's it's like, oh, I'm gonna try to stuff this in my hole, and God, can
I can see the strap lines now on all the articles.
Get that out of my holes and all this stuff.
Yeah, cram this in your hole. Yeah.
So if only for that reason, I want to play.
Well, it's kind of. I'm just watching the trailer now, and it's kind of a. It depends how I guess how deep you want to be about it, but there is that kind of we just in video games we destroy a lot of stuff, and usually typically that's with a weapon or a gun or whatever it might be, and this is kind of the. It's kind of like destroying stuff just from the absence of stuff. You just put this hole underneath something and then it's gone. And like there's no sort of big explosion. There's no anything. It's just things fall into it. And there's a whole mountain I've just seen disappear in the trailer. So it's I don't know that it's meant to be any sort of commentary on that, but it's kind of a different take on a much gentler and much more charming, by the looks of it, take on mass destruction, which is a common video game theme. Well, they're doing stuff for the games. That's an interesting sort of point, because there's that sort of brain teaser, I suppose you could call it, that sort of that conflicting idea of what is a hole. Is a hole a thing, or is it an absence of a thing? So don't expect that game to answer that question definitively. But. Just play it and have fun. That's it. That's all you need to do. Yeah. Cool. Okay. Well, I'm sure there are many others. However, we can probably do another one of these types of episodes in a couple of weeks, maybe, or something like that. Once we've had a chance to digest a lot of the other stuff that's come out of E3. But yeah, I think I mean it's this is one of the few we did our sort of special podcast episode to look back at the first 10 episodes, didn't we? And we also talked about the Patreon on there. And do check us out, patreon.com/indie by design. But yeah, I think we're going to try and do some more episodes like this, try and just kind of get together a bit more often and just chat through some stuff. So yeah, on those lines, I guess if there's anything in particular, people on Twitter or Facebook or Patreon or via our website or anywhere else would like to contribute, like us to chat about, then drop us a line and we'll try and take a look at it.
All of our social media channels are at Indie by Design, so
nice and easy.
YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Patreon, everything is on our website as well. Everything is just at Indie by Design now. Didn't used to be, but it is.
We bought up the names at huge expense. No, we didn't. They were just available, so that was quite handy. And our YouTube channel actually is worth having a look at in terms of the indie game side of actually viewing games rather than just hearing us talk about them, because we've got a couple of streams on there. We've got a couple of recorded videos on there. I think Dead Cells is one of them, and Serious Sam's Bogus Detour is another one. Edith Finch, What Remains of Edith Finch, and Gone Home, and there's a whole bunch of stuff on there, so go and have a look at that if you've got a spare 10 minutes or 3 hours. That's plenty of content on there to have a look at. Cool. Okay, so I guess what's really left to say is we'll be back again with another episode like this in the future, but we will be resuming or continuing the usual Wednesday releases of our podcasts, where one of us sits down with a game developer or designer, somebody involved in the creation of games, and we chat to them, and those episodes come out every Wednesday, and there's extra content for those, a lot of those episodes going up on our Patreon page, so check that out as well. Awesome. Okay, that's enough spiel.
Cool.
So yeah, we'll leave it there, and we will catch everybody next time.
Yeah, catch you later.